Perry Mason became one of the most promising news shows of the year, as well as one of the most frustrating, by the conclusion of its first season. The season featured a fantastic cast, meticulously reconstructed 1930s Los Angeles, and set everything to a brooding, noir-inspired score by Terence Blanchard. It was a fresh take on Earl Stanley Gardner's Los Angeles defense attorney who solves mysteries. The premiere episode of Perry Mason's second season firmly names this delusion as justice. So where is the eponymous anti-hero from Chapter 9 at the beginning? After the Dodson trial from the first season ended in a mistrial, Emily Dodson, Gail Rankin, was freed of all charges for the abduction and murder of her unborn child. Mason, who had been forced to sell his family farm, is found at a typical 1930s LA apartment building pulling wrinkly shirts and ties out of dusty boxes. He arrives at his workplace riding a stolen motorcycle, which, as we will later learn, he took his payment from a different unfortunate client. The hard-boiled detective with a golden heart, hidden beneath a thick coat of PTSD, melancholy, and alcoholism, is perfectly captured by Matthew Rhys. His distinctive appearance and physique also easily recontextualize the 1970s alternative leading man for a contemporary TV audience. So it's just as accurate and convincing as ever when he slubs into the offices of Perry Mason, attorney at law, his prickly demeanor softened by a pair of sad, sympathetic eyes. Our resident girl boss, a term of endearment in this case, Della Street, Joliet Rylance, is out here keeping the firm afloat with a modest pool of civil cases, while putting herself on track to get an attorney's license and become a partner. Their push and pull between each other is the lifeblood of this modest firm. When Mason gets to work, he finds that Della has hired a secretary without getting his permission. This sets off yet another fierce battle of wits and wills between frequent scene partners Rhys and Rylance, who have gotten particularly skilled at it. Mason, however, is focused elsewhere. His attention veers up to the framed newspaper headline Mysterio, Dodson free on the wall. He is still troubled by the case from last season and the unresolved issue of whether justice was served after the jury's decision, and things are about to get much worse. The start of our subsequent scenario with Mason is a nightmare. In his kitchen, Emily Dodson is suffocating where she is while attempting to speak in between gargling and retching breaths. Mason is startled awake as she hits the ground, and we see an empty bottle next to an opened letter from our former PI friend Pete Strickland, Shiwam. The cause of death listed on Dodson's death certificate is suicide by water. We cut to Mason riding his motorbike down a lonely, dark road while Dodson reads him heartbreaking postcards she had sent him during the intervening months. Mason concludes his ride with a minor collision and shows up to court the following day with a pronounced limp and a pant leg covered in blood. He is hardly a Saul Goodman type, but he is skilled in the art of show and Machiavellian tactics for the greater good, so everything fits into his developing court image. The only issue is that Mason is on the wrong side of justice in this legal case despite being on the right side of the law. Scene Rudy or Samwise Aston plays Sonny Grice, a Trumpian general store owner who is suing a former employee, Ed Pertel, Matt Bush, for opening up his own business across the street, in a wickedly type-defying role. Sonny is Mason's client. It appears that this individual was solely responsible for setting up Sonny's shop, coming up with the tagline, and writing the manager's manual. He anticipated working independently and recovering the entire value of his labor from a cruel boss boot. Whether or not this guy's case was valid, Mason's obscene and unquestionably sharp cross-examination invalidates it, a contorted physical manifestation of the character's deeply felt spiritual compromise. Rice portrays Mason's physical injury, enthusiasm for his job when he's working at full capacity, and utter disgust with the situation all at once, creating another horrifying, uncanny image of American life that this genre is so apt to facilitate. Later, Sonny Grice is given a fair compromise offer by Mason and Della, but this asshole doesn't think it's good enough. He intends to destroy the opposition. Mercy doesn't win wars, as both you and I are well aware. Do I need to recruit another combatant? He fails to realize that Mason can finish the task and will do so. He simply has no illusions about what that entails. Back in court, Pertel is compelled to transfer ownership of his business to Sonny in order to escape an overwhelming amount of debt. Following the proceedings, Mason and Della enjoy a drink, but their moods couldn't be more dissimilar. Although they are both striving towards the same goal, a more secure future for their company and themselves, Della is more committed than the other. She is taking the predicament as a necessary step in the direction of a more secure future. Whatever fiery goals she and Mason may have in common, their approaches to pursuing them are completely different. Mason's tendency towards self-destruction is also not helping him. Assistant DA Hamilton Berger comments to Mason that despite all of his brooding skepticism, he still believes in justice. He is correct. That is the demon in the middle of the ring out of all those that our man has. There is only the appearance of fairness. There is no real justice. Berger will carry out the city's instructions as long as there is a system that appears to function, and as long as people still trust in justice. Who would like to participate in that? Mason responds, but he is aware that his response is irrelevant. Everyone is required to participate in this system, whether they want to or not, and fairness is an illusion in it by design rather than mistake. By the conclusion of the episode, all three of our main characters have taken the traditional American stance of compromising their morals in order to get what they want. Paul Drake, Chris Chalk, who we last saw leaving the police force to join Mason's new company as lead detective, completes the trio with Mason and Della. Since Mason shifted to handling civil cases, Drake's business has been slow, so Mason asks Strickland to offer him a job. The DA's office requires someone to enter covertly so they can take pictures of a black crime boss who runs his operations out of a black hotel and keep tabs on his whereabouts. Drake doesn't like being put in this situation, but he has no option but to accept the job. I'm not sure how far this specific plotline will develop because I have no doubt Mason will hire Drake before the season is over. However, for the time being, it's a fascinating detail in LA's endless strata of talent and emotion that are inexorably channeled into the indentured service of evil forces. Our season's largest homicide victim is discovered at the bottom of the strata. Enter Kendall Roy, a brief-lived character from this program, and Brooks McCutcheon, Tommy Dewey, the heir apparent to the McCutcheon oil empire, though infinitely waspier and douchier. They really went with the polar reverse here, because the victim in the previous season was a literal infant. We first meet Brooks at the conclusion of a sadistic turn with a sex worker at his family's country club. He then walks outside and kisses his wife and children before his father Lydell, Paul Racy, a suitably unsettling, Getty-like, skeletal but strong presence, arrives and summons him for a severe reprimand. With all of his father's money, this Weasley wealthy kid fuckboy believes he can pull off bold moves like sabotaging a rival's boat. Brooks tries to convince Lydell that the fire went a little out of control, but his grandfather won't listen. Lydell advises Brooks to take a step back. Get out of your position with the business, get out of your gambling business, and get out of your bullshit with the baseball club. A solid base is necessary for building something, and Brooks's is solid as a sand castle. Lydell's voice cracks with a tinge of desperation at this point, and his eyes change from being stern and cold to being lush and pleading. Brooks is adamant that his shit doesn't stink, especially this new baseball team he's bringing to the city. Follow my recommendation and leave, he claims, an ominous shift. His dad realizes something is about to happen to his number one boy. Lydell's cries go unanswered. The generational wealth's unearned hubris won't be able to rescue this child because he is in over his head. Brooks makes good progress with his back and puts on a performance at one of the family's soup kitchens, where he announces the baseball team in McCutcheon Stadium that he is constructing for the city. When his lawyer informs him they can't convince a baseball team to relocate to Los Angeles, he'll lose it at his floating speakeasy and storm out of the scene. He'll do it as his last act before being shot on the sand in his flashy yellow vehicle. Everyone aboard the good ship Perry Mason is caught in some dark corner of the odd, sinister labyrinth of sunny old Cronville, USA, when the inciting event occurs, and they are all left wondering where and when is justice truly served. That is, of course, presuming that justice is actually administered. Otherwise, it is all a big illusion.